In this video, I'm going to talk about the links between gender and sexuality and sex in ancient Rome. So before we get going, I just want to go over a few basic concepts again. And again, I'm going to really simplify this down. I'm not an expert in this field, but just to give you a bit of an idea about the way in which we should be looking at things. So in the modern world, we tend to see people's sexuality as in terms of who they are attracted to or who they perform sexual acts with. So we have labels like heterosexuality and homosexuality and bisexuality and asexuality, and all of those really link into who your choice of sexual partner is. Whereas the Greeks and the Romans tended to view sexuality more in the lens of what you did and what role you played in a sexual act. And so as we go through this topic, it's helpful if you look at things as being on the continuum of active or passive. So active, you are penetrating someone, and passive, you are being penetrated, whatever or wherever that might be in your body. And so think of it in those terms, would be, I guess, the main ideas or the typical ideas in ancient sexuality, rather than the view we've got today where we're looking on a continuum of homosexual to heterosexual or something in between. So as well as a lot of the other ideas we've seen in gender, sex is also very closely linked to status in ancient Rome. So the word vir, plural is viri, refers to a man in Latin as opposed to a woman. However, not every male person could be considered a vir. It is only used of free adult male citizens. So foreigners are not viri, slaves are not viri. It is only, I guess, if you are kind of socially, you have the status of a man. And so in Roman society, men, the ideal position for a man was that of an impenetrable penetrator. It was their role to be the active party in a sexual relationship, and they should not be the passive one. There's a bit of a contrast to in Greek society, where you have the concept of the eromenos and erastes relationship between a citizen youth and a slightly older adult. There's the idea that in Roman society, even when you're a young man, as a citizen, you should never be penetrated. So we can see here that sex is another form of social distinction. As I said before, not every man was aware, but women obviously could not be considered as viri. And sex was another way of showing your power, and so it was basically expected of Roman men, of viri, that they should be able to express their power, their dominion, by penetrating others sexually. And there was also a stigma associated with being the passive recipient of a sexual act. So if someone penetrated you, then that was, I guess, considered to be placing yourself below them in a kind of social hierarchy. And so if you did that as a citizen male, that was a big no-no. So linking into that, I'll just briefly talk about what was viewed as passive male sexuality. So if you were a citizen man and you allowed someone else to penetrate you, that was considered really bad. Your body should not be violated in that way. You should be doing things the other way round. And they actually had a phrase for this in Latin, pati muliebra, which means to suffer womanly things. So it was considered something that a woman should be doing. So if you regularly did this, if you were seen to enjoy this, being the passive partner in a sexual relationship, you would be mocked and scorned and humiliated. So there's a few different words that are used in Latin to describe these sorts of men. So one is pathicus. It comes from the same root as pati, so it means you're having something done to you, you're suffering, you're undergoing something. Canidas, some translations will just translate this as homosexual, but it's not necessarily the correct way. If you look at where this is used in Latin literature, it's used to refer of someone who violates basic gender rules and decorum. So they're not necessarily what we would see as homosexual. And so all of these sorts of people would be shamed alongside prostitutes, gladiators, and actors. So in Roman society, these people were all looked down on because they were not in control of their own bodies. At the sort of extreme end of this idea of men as being the active player in a sexual act, we can take it to the extreme and look at the sort of sexual aggression. So we could describe Roman society as phallocentric, centered around the phallus, and that is seen as a way of wielding power. So you probably will have seen this fresco of Priapus. I've decided just to cut it off at the crucial point. He is a god of fertility and also of gardens. And so there's a lot of interest in phallic culture and penis size. And so statues and pictures of Priapus were often put near the entrance to your house. And it's sort of a warning that if you enter this space without permission, if you rob this space, the god Priapus will rape you as a punishment. So sex and male sexual aggression is a way of dominating others, even other men, and it's also a way to establish your political and social superiority. We'll turn now to look at female sexuality. So ideally in Roman society, a woman would only have sex with her husband to produce an heir. That was seen as the main reason for a woman to have sex. And if a woman had an affair, if she had sex with someone who was not her husband, or if someone had sex with a married woman, that was considered a crime, because it is, I guess, violating the property of that head of the household, and it is putting the heir, or the I guess the, what's the term looking for, putting the, whether the heir of that man is actually his child or someone else's, at risk. So you don't want to have questions over the paternity of your heir. So ideally your wife would not be sleeping with anyone else. But the Romans also had a sense that women, being lesser creatures, were unable to control their sexual desires, and if they weren't fully supervised, they were worried that they would sleep with anyone and anything who moved. So they had to be kept. A close eye had to be kept on them. So they did have more freedom than Greek women, but they were still closely watched. Same-sex female relations, what we'd see as lesbianism today, was seen as particularly unnatural in Roman eyes, because women were meant to be the passive partner. Someone was meant to be penetrating them, and also the fact that women did not have a specific organ to penetrate another woman with, and so they would have to rely on artificial means. So there was something that the Romans found really unnatural about that. One word that is used to describe these women is tribus in Latin. However, same thing as kanidos, don't see it as a simple translation for lesbian. It is used of a woman playing an active role in a sexual act. So has also been used in contexts where a woman is having sex with a man, but she is penetrating him. So it's not necessarily lesbian, it's a woman playing an active role in a sexual act. And finally, I'm just going to touch on how I guess too much sex is a bad thing. So across all aspects of their society, the Romans strongly believed in moderation, that too much or too little of anything was a bad thing, and so sex is clearly no exception to this. Generally, you wouldn't be criticised if you played the correct role with the appropriate partner. So if you were a man and you were the active partner in a sexual relationship with your wife, with a non-citizen woman or man, slaves, prostitutes, that's all fine and good in Roman eyes. However, if you spent too much of your time or too much of your money on sex, if you let it get in the way of your role in society, your job, and so on, that would be criticised. So they've got very specific ideas around sex, and it's when you step outside of those that attention is drawn to you.